Hi. So there are many things in a home studio that are important to make the best music productions that you can make, but I would argue that accurately listening to what you are doing is one of the most essential ones. And therefore upgrading your monitoring or possibly acoustic treatment is high on the list of things that can really elevate your game. I feel it can bring far greater benefits than getting yet another effects plugin or virtual instrument, for example, even though I love those too, and they're usually cheaper. So this video is not just a review of the new monitors that I got, but also why I decided to upgrade, what was involved, and what I got out of it so far. Just in case you're in the same situation and are thinking about upgrading your monitoring to either the Adam A8H or any other one for that matter. So let's go. Now, I've had my Adam P22A monitors for somewhere between 15 and 20 years by now. Can't even remember anymore exactly when I bought them, but it was a long time ago and I made many mixes for my band The Wash on them. I always found their sound very crisp and detailed, and even just listening to music on them has always been a real joy. But about half a year ago I got the Slate VSX headphone system, which I haven't done a video about yet. And I noticed that they really added to being able to make an accurate mix, because I was able to focus on certain things in the frequency spectrum that I wasn't so clearly getting out of my monitors, but which I heard much more clearly on those VSX headphones. Even though I have a room with acoustic treatment and Sonarworks SoundID Reference, there was still quite a difference. So I figured that after using the same monitors for 15-20 years now, it might be time for an upgrade. Now, monitors are a really personal choice, of course, and I didn't actually go listen to a bunch of different types, because there was not really a place around here where I could go and listen to all the various ones that I was interested in next to each other, and then listening to one monitor in one place and another monitor in another place. Well, it doesn't work for me. It's very hard to remember what you heard a couple of days before and compare it to what you're listening to now, for example. And another reason is that the room really affects the sound of the speakers. So the speaker that sounds great in the demo room may not sound very good when they're back in your home studio. So given the fact that I've always really liked the speakers from Adam Audio, I decided to look for an upgrade within their range and arrived at the A series, specifically the Adam A8H, which I consider a real upgrade because they're three-way speakers, where my previous speakers were two-way. They have the speaker advancements of Adam Audio in there over the last 20 years. And what I also liked about the A-series speakers is that they have integration with Sonarworks SoundID. So the room speaker correction can be uploaded into the speaker and you no longer need that separate plugin or system-wide application from SoundID to get your correction. And apart from that, these speakers are also twice as expensive as my previous ones, so they must be an upgrade, right? Because in this game, you actually really get what you pay for. Now, talking about money, I could have gone even higher up, and then you get into the range of the ATC speakers, the PMCs, the PSIs, where you're spending close to $10,000 or euros to get a pair of speakers. I didn't want to go that far this time in this modest home studio that I have over here. So that's basically how I ended up with the Adam A8H speakers. But your selection process may be quite different, of course, but this was mine. So let's have a look at the properties of these speakers on the Adam Audio website. So the A8H speakers incorporate an 8-inch resonant multi-layer mineral fiber woofer, an innovative mid-range driver and a handmade Precision X ART tweeter, which together produce an ultra-wide frequency response. And like the other members of the A series, the A8H gives you a lot of flexibility for fine-tuning the sound through the rotatable HPS waveguide, that's basically the tweeter enclosure, and via onboard DSP. According to the website, they're at home across a full range of audio applications in mid to full-sized spaces, and the A8H is the right choice when you're looking for the most detailed representation of your audio, and it's available in a separate left and right version. So the woofer is 8-inch, the mid-range driver is 3.5-inch, and the total power of this speaker is 340 watts, and the frequency response up to the -6 dB points is 31 Hz to 45 kHz. Maximum peak sound pressure level per speaker at 1 meter is 105 decibels. So that's the tech data, and what I really like about these speakers is that they have network ports on the back of them, which allow you to make all the settings that they have on the back via the A-Control software. So currently you can see that I have a SoundID Reference profile loaded, but by default they are set to the pure mode, which is a flat frequency response, which they recommend for analytical and critical listening during mixing and mastering, for example. Then you can also set them to UNR mode, which is a bit more scooped, and it's supposed to give you more listening pleasure for when you're producing music. And in both pure and UNR mode, you can do some simple compensations if you want more or less bass, want to get rid of some desk reflections, more or less presence, more or less treble. If you want to have more control than this, you can also go to their advanced mode, which basically gives you a 6-band equalizer that you can use to suppress or enhance certain frequency ranges. Then you have the mode in which you are using your SoundID reference profile, which I use by default, and you can also turn everything off, and then you will basically only hear the speakers without DSP. Now, before I go into setting up these speakers and tuning them to my room, if you like this video or find it useful at all, please give it a big thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm so that it gets shown to more people. Subscribe to the channel and ring the little bell icon so you know when I post another video. And if you want to support the channel even more, you can consider using the super thanks button below the video, which is a virtual tip jar. Or you can also use my affiliate links in the description to one of these stores. If you want to buy anything at these stores and you click the store affiliate link first, then I will get a small commission on whatever you buy without any additional cost to you. A great support to the channel and much appreciated. But let's now get back to how I set up these speakers and tune them in practice in my home studio, so you know what's involved there. Now, when it comes to setting up, I put these speakers on new speaker stands from Gravity, which I bought via Thomann. And I needed new speaker stands because the previous speaker stands that I had could not be adjusted in height. And that's really necessary for these speakers because these are horizontal. So they need to be put up a bit higher than my previous speakers, which were vertical. Now, Adam recommends that you burn in these speakers for at least 8 hours. So that's actually what I did before I even connected the speakers and listened to them, because I really wanted to tune the speakers right away before using them, and then they first need to be burned in, which gets rid of a bit of the stiffness of the cones that they have after manufacturing. And you can do that either by listening to the music for 8 hours, but I decided to use the burn-in procedure, which you can see over here. I was basically feeding these monitors with pink noise, where the left speaker channel was phase inverted compared to the right speaker channel. That was actually a tip provided by Adam in their special video about burning in their speakers, because you need to turn up the volume pretty loud, and if you phase them like this and invert the phase of one speaker, especially the low frequencies cancel each other out, so it's not such a pain for your neighbors or for yourself. Now, after they were burned in, I put these speakers in the right positions. They're basically in the same positions as my previous monitors, a little bit further back. And then I used the calibration procedure with SonarWorks SoundID Reference, which basically guides you through a lot of positions in front of the speakers so that you end up with an accurate profile of how these speakers sound on average in the various listening positions. And SoundID Reference then ends up with a profile of how your speakers behave in your room so that they can compensate for any big frequency deviations so that you can get as flat a frequency response as possible. Now, the nice thing about the A-series monitors from Adam Audio is, of course, that you can import that SoundID correction profile directly into the speakers. Let me show you how that works, because this is basically the profile that SoundID measured in my room for these speakers. So you see a big bump here around 40, a big valley around 70 over here, which are actually room modes which are pretty hard to correct for. And you see it slowly taper off in the high end. So they came up with the following calibration profile to correct that, which is the green line, which is opposite of what they measured. And you can then export that profile over here. You can choose to export for the Adam Audio A-series. Now, there are various modes that you can use to export them. You can say that you don't want any boosts in the correction, which is actually what Adam Audio recommended. But I tried all 3 of them, and I finally ended up with a reduced boost calibration limit of 6 dB. And if you then click next, the export is saved on disk, and you can import that into the A-Control software over here. Like this, you can see that I tried several, and if you then import it, it will immediately switch to SoundID Reference mode over here with your imported profiles showing over here for the 2 speakers. All in all, a pretty smooth experience, but I did of course want to check the results, like how flat did SoundID get me. So I measured that with a free program called Room EQ Wizard. Let's have a look. Because this was the initial measurement of Room EQ Wizard in pure mode. And yeah, if you compare that to the SoundID Reference measurement, yeah, I cannot line them up exactly, but it's pretty similar, right? There's not exactly the same amount of smoothing. Room EQ Wizard shows only one speaker that I measured. I just measured the left speaker. SoundID Reference shows both speakers. But the gist of it is pretty the same, so that's good. And these curves are now before correction. So after loading the SoundID Reference profile into the speaker, the measurement was as follows, the red line. So you can clearly see that the response is much more flat compared to the green line. It has reduced these peaks and valleys over here. This low mid-range part has been significantly reduced. And it has also removed that tapering off of the high end over here at the top. But I have to say that when I listened to this profile on these speakers, they sounded a bit harsh to me. So I felt that SoundID had corrected a bit too much. So I decided to also try the advanced correction mode, which is part of the Adam audio speakers itself, which is in A control. So I set up this correction curve over here, -6 to compensate for that 40 Hz bump, +6 to compensate for the 75 Hz valley, and a bit more on top, trying to get the same kind of correction as SoundID did, but with a bit less boost on the high end to make it sound a little less harsh. And that basically made me end up with this profile. So the red one over here is the one with SoundID correction, and the blue one over here is the one with manual correction in the advanced mode of the A control software by Adam Audio. But you can still see that SoundID managed to correct it a little bit better. For example, over here at 60-70 Hz, SoundID has more significantly reduced that little valley over here. SoundID, the red one, has also better compensated here around, what is this, 125 Hz. I did like the high-end sound a little bit better on the blue profile. It didn't sound harsh anymore. But given the fact that SoundID managed to correct it better, and also, of course, it had separate left and right profiles to compensate slightly different for the left and right speaker, which I didn't do in advanced mode, I decided to continue with the SoundID reference profile, but then correct it a little bit in the high end, which you can do in the SoundID software before sending it to the Adam speakers. And that's this profile that I created in SoundID. I didn't use the flat target, but I used the custom target. And I made the low-mid reduction a little bit less than SoundID suggested. And I also made the high-end reduction a little bit less by adding these EQ points in SoundID Reference. I then exported this profile again and loaded it up into the speakers. Did another measurement with Room EQ Wizard. And that ended up as this corrected SoundID profile compared to the initial SoundID profile. You can see that it doesn't compensate the high end as much, and there's a little bit more in the low mids, although not a lot. And compared to the uncorrected measurement, you can see that the differences are quite big. So green is before correction and yellow is the more flatter response after correction, which I feel is quite an improvement. Yeah, the room modes on the low end, they're very hard to correct by EQ because they just happen due to standing waves of the low frequencies in your room, which is basically related to room dimensions. I may still try to move the speakers or move the listening position a bit, but I don't really have a lot of room to maneuver over here. But if you look at the differences over here, you can see that in the final measurement, the highest point here is at 82 dB on the left side, and the lowest point is at 71 dB. So that's a difference of about 11 dB. And that's not really bad at all, because in a typical home studio with an ideal acoustic treatment, you can expect to be within a range of +5 to -5 dB, which this almost is. And in Pro Studios, you can expect to get a flat frequency response within + or -3 dB even. But that's not really an option over here. Now, after I did this EQ calibration, I also calibrated the monitoring listening level to make sure that these monitors sound as loud as my previous monitors. So my actual reference level that I'm using in the studio is the same as I had previously. And that's actually a separate procedure which is not related to SoundID or these monitors specifically. So I will probably do a separate video about that if you're interested. Now, so far I've used these monitors only for a couple of days, of course, but my impression so far compared to my P22A monitors is that I hear a lot more low end and low mids from these monitors. And I think that's mostly because the low end and low mids are so tight. Maybe it has to do with the new woofer design that they have, because I did also get low end and low mids from the P22A monitors, of course, but it always felt a bit underdeveloped and quite loose. And these ones, well, the low end is definitely not exaggerated, but it's definitely more present. You can really feel it more, even though the general volume of the speakers is the same as on my previous speakers. What I also noticed is that the stereo imaging is more defined and more clear. If you close your eyes, you can really pinpoint where all the instruments are. You can hear the vocal coming from straight ahead of you, even though there's no speaker there, of course. Now, the other monitors did that as well, but on these ones, it's just more clear and more defined. And I'm also hearing more depth in these speakers, so the various layers of drums in the background, vocal in the foreground, are much more defined as on the previous speakers. And in general, I just hear more details using these speakers compared to the previous speakers. So you can really hear some stuff poking out, which I didn't hear before. So I've already started adjusting some of the mixes that I'm working on. Now, how all of this translates to other systems, yeah, I still have to wait and see that. Maybe I'll make a follow-up video in a couple of months or in half a year or so to give my final impressions, but so far so good and I like them. And by the way, this video is not sponsored. I bought these monitors with my own money, and whatever I'm saying in here is really my opinion. Adam Audio doesn't even know that I'm making this video and will not get to see it before you do. Now let me know if you want to see any more details on any of the steps that I presented in this video, or want to know more about these monitors specifically. And if you're thinking about upgrading your monitors, or maybe you have just upgraded your monitors and have experience with these Adam monitors, let us know in the comments as well so we can all learn from that. Now this time I will let YouTube decide on what's the next best video for specifically you on my channel, and it will be linked over here. Check it out, enjoy, and see you soon.